You are listening to the Intelligent Vocalist Podcast, episode 86.
Welcome to the Intelligent Vocalist with John Henny. This is the podcast dedicated to help you be a smarter, better, more informed singer. And now, your host for the Intelligent Vocalist, John Henny.
Hey there, this is John Henny. Welcome back to another edition of the Intelligent Vocalist Podcast. I do so appreciate you spending your precious time listening to me. However, today's not just me. It is part 2 of my interview with Chris Johnson of the Naked Vocalist podcast. And today I submitted readers' questions to Chris. I polled my email list and just asked what they would like to know. And we cover such things as balanced compression, vowels and different languages, singing when you're sick, matching pitch. So it's a lot of fun talking to Chris. I really enjoy it. I always find his view on the voice very informed and insightful. Again, this was my first guest. I tried to do a Facebook Live at the same time. Made a mess of the technology, really didn't think that one through. So luckily, Chris recorded on his end. So I'm using his feed because his voice is nice and clear. Mine suffers a bit. I don't even think I had the right mic chosen. So this was me, the intrepid podcaster jumping into unknown waters and just sinking, tied to the technology stone. But I try not to talk near as much as Chris because he's the guest. So my less than perfect vocal quality, I don't think really takes away from it, but just thought you should be aware. And without further ado, I bring you Chris Johnson.
Once again, I am with Chris Johnson of the Naked Vocalist podcast. Welcome, Chris.
Welcome. Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, what I want to do is just go through some questions that were sent my way to ask you and just to get your opinion on all things singing.
Lovely. Okay.
Because one thing we both have is opinion.
Best.
Yeah. I'm thinking you and I should do a podcast just called Two Voice Teachers Complaining.
Yeah. we didn't record the last 20 minutes, did we?
No, we didn't.
No, damn. That was good shit.
That would be the premiere episode.
We're positive with our students the whole time, and occasionally we just say things rubbish.
Or we'll just call it, oh my gosh, yeah. Voice teachers complaining about the voice teaching industry. How about that?
It's niche.
It's a funny business we're in, isn't it?
Yeah, funny business. But we love it though.
Actually,
no one can see my face though, can they?
Our students. Most of them, unless of course the ones we don't know. But let's go ahead. Speaking of students and singers, I've got some questions here for you. So when you are dealing, a lot of times we talk about vowels, and I've run into this because I have like my reference of vowels and how I speak, and then kind of my modifications for that. But when I go to other countries, I get this pushback that I'm trying to get them to talk American, or we get into other languages where, like, very often I'll go like, oh, the vowel is so great for, getting the larynx stable in certain acoustic reasons. Yeah. But they don't have that vowel in every language or every dialect. So how do you deal with that? And this comes from Sophia, who's talking about in Spanish. They basically have like 5 vowels, and I'm prattling on about sounds that they don't necessarily have to deal with. And so some of the concepts get muddied for them.
Yeah. And you know what? So I find some languages, I think Spanish probably is one that I've observed in the past. Maybe even some of the Far Eastern dialects as well, like Thai, for example, Chinese, things like that. Not only do some of the deeper vowels like and sometimes they don't exist because generally the dialect is spoken on such a bright plane, where it's sitting very specifically, right? and you would sound almost stupid in that language if you didn't speak on that bright and sort of plain, that kind of twang, if you like. So obviously that's one part of it, but I find that actually the most relaxed sort of breathing in position resembles an even if it's not in the language, like that kind of thing. And so for someone who's not used to either just a relaxed larynx and throat or that vowel itself, you can use the inspiratory, and I think I saw Dr. Scott McCoy doing also like a pant of a big dog versus a little chihuahua or something. Mm-hmm. So the breathing situation is actually quite good to tune the vowel, giving the proprioception, like we used to do in SLS and stuff. I don't want to get people obsessed about their larynx, because actually that didn't help me at times in my past. However, when you breathe in this way, you can get this sort of biofeedback, as you would say, from the larynx, to also be able to cross-reference what you feel in terms of muscle activity, what spatial awareness you have in the throat, and how that corresponds to what you feel on the outside of your neck, being the larynx. And making sounds on that gives you a much better idea of this under-vowel principle from Ken Bozeman, if you like, who talks about that a lot, where the under-vowel is the sort of thing that settles the larynx. So the vowel being one of them, the is another. So I find that's how I would approach that in a lot of dialects that might not have those in their language.
I think it's interesting because the traditional music that grew out of that language incorporates the sounds of those languages.
Yeah.
And so if the language has that thinner, brighter texture to it, the music, the singing has that. But very often now,
classical and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But in this world of information we live in now, and just the influence of a lot of Western music into other cultures, now they're wanting to sing in a language that has these deeper sounds and music that incorporates that type of sound, which I think that where the challenge starts to come from.
Yeah, then those say people all around the world, but they want to be singing in a particular market of British and American.
Yeah.
Then that's obviously a much more difficult transition, where learning these shapes is really crucial to being able to live in that kind of music. But yeah, if you're in your own country, it's kind of arguably like, do you really need to know how to do that vowel if you're going to sing your music? Or you tend to find actually you get almost like hints going towards these more settled undervowels. If instead of focusing on the vowel, which might make the foreign music more irrelevant, right? Now it's like I don't sound like Indian classical anymore. It sounds like Western classical, which is not right. Then instead what you could do is go, okay, all of the structures that connect to that larynx and refer strain, it's those that you get to reduce their contraction, like the back of the tongue, the pharynx, the jaw, and things like that. And that can actually just get enough of that settling to keep relevant, but not be strained to nuts over the singing.
Yeah, and for the non-voice teachers, the pharynx being more the throat area.
The walls of the throat, right from the larynx up to the palate.
Yeah. And you brought up a really key word, and something I'm somewhat obsessed with as a voice teacher is this idea of the under-vowel.
Yeah.
Right? So if you can explain that for people.
Yeah, sure. So it's a concept that was kind of born out of the classical, I guess, whereby relevantly, if the larynx sits in a slightly lower position, then there can be acoustical benefits from that, i.e. like resonance can support us in certain ways, which is very applicable to certain tasks. But we can take it forward into contemporary singing because the larynx that's settling lower, like resting in its resting position, is, I think, all round good for resetting one's voice, finding a baseline rather than being in a hyper-functional state a lot of the time, whereby you can't find a relaxed baseline. So there's many uses for it, but what it tends to be is the under-vowel is a sense of a vowel that sets the throat, if you like, the space of the throat, in a favorable position and a loose position. And what we can do is when someone says, or even just, they'll get a sense of the throat and its looseness and its space, the larynx's position. Then we can maintain that undervowel, that space and the sense of it, but then place place an overvowel on top of it, which is where the tongue gets involved and actually creates this overvowel, also lips and jaw. And when the undervowel is lost, for instance, we get where you can hear elements of under E. Quite often with E, you get E, because we want to sound so good with our diction sometimes. We focus so much on the overvowel that we lose the undervowel. And then when we lose the undervowel, sometimes, quite a lot of the time, we lose a lot of space, looseness, freedom in those muscles that keep the throat shape integrity. And whenever those muscles become a bit wild or hyperfunctional, then we tend to experience or we lose degrees of freedom. And that's important. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. The most popular episode, most downloaded episode I've done of this podcast is called The Greatest Secret of Singing.
Nice.
Probably because that headline's a bit of a cheat, because anytime you put The Greatest Secret, it's almost like clickbait. But, and I got hassled from voice teachers for doing that, but it got downloaded a lot. So there.
I just have to throw in there as well, your podcast with us on the Naked Vocalist, I think is the second most downloaded. Ingo Dunya.
Oh no!
Yeah,
well, if I'm going to be beaten by somebody, Ingo Tietze.
Yeah, but you're next, man.
Yeah. That's probably the only level at which I could compete with Ingo.
We'll have to find something obscure like darts.
Yeah, maybe arm wrestling. But now I've lost my train of thought, which is pretty typical.
Sorry,
the most popular episode. The secret of singing is this idea of utilizing that condition and setting vowels over it. I'm gonna save everybody a lot of money. If you come and spend money to study with me, that's what I'm going to teach you. A lot of the time. I mean,
so get a head start.
So get a head start. Just do that. But this idea that the undervowel is absolutely, to me, is so important.
Yeah.
Now, Kelly, what are some of your, Kelly asks, what are some of your best tips for finding balanced compression?
Oh, okay.
A hard one.
That is a hard one because it's a multifaceted thing. It's like it's contributed to by so many factors. And
let's go ahead and define compression for everybody, or how you think of compression.
So I'm thinking the pressure at which the vocal folds come together, and there are several muscles that can do that. Some of them close the back of the vocal folds, the arytenoid cartilages. There's a complex of muscles there that can create that sort of back closure, if you like.
Yep.
But then the tension within the vocal folds themselves provides closure also along that plane, but also from the top to the bottom. And accessing all those muscles in very different ways can create all of the different colors that we get in singing. So a sound can sound a bit compressed and breathy at the same time, which is absolutely bonkers when you start listening to voices. You're like, this is blowing my mind. This sounds squeezed and breathy at the same time. What the so that one's difficult. So in the diagnostic process, if I hear pressed voice, sometimes or squeezed compression excess, it can sometimes be a bit of a muddle trying to figure out what's causing that. Because I don't find, as a singer myself, I really have to manage my compression. I find I've managed enough other things that compression is just allowed to be what it is from my conception of singing. I don't conceive singing to be shouting, so I don't really overcompress, right? But sometimes the conception of what singing is overrides the physical kind of balance, and then suddenly we get a problem. And we'll go through a lot of vocal exercises to resolve that. But in truth, the singer has got a deep-rooted belief that is causing that problem, right? So I tend to go and ask a lot of questions about the conception of what you believe you have to do in order to make your voice work. And when people say, I really have to bring my vocal folds together, I've been taught that, I tend to try and pick that apart because sometimes it's not actually that helpful, right? So if your aim is to get your compression just right at the start of a line, I think that's worth exploring. It's not that I don't use that as a tool. You know, you can practice onsets to get a sense of it, but it does become very innate. But when you look then at the rest of the voice, excess tension all around the muscles above the larynx can create such instability that the compensation of that can be that the throat just shuts down on that larynx to hold it together. Because if it didn't, you couldn't make the sound you wanted to. Or you could, but you would crack. And our brains and our bodies don't want that. So they corroborate to give you what you want by any means possible, right? So we have tension in those muscles. Also, the vocal folds do respond in innate ways to intensity and subglottal pressure from the body. So if we give it some airflow, or we're in a situation whereby there's tight muscles in the abdomen that won't let go, or in the chest, what we'll do, we'll breathe in, and then as soon as we sing, there's such contraction that subglottal pressure will be high right from the get-go. And the voice responds to that very much like a brace, like that. So the quicker the subglottal pressure that's experienced, quite often the voice, if it's strong enough, will just close it down. And then you'll be pressed. Some singers then are weakened by that, and then they get blown apart a lot of the time and start cracking when they get fatigued, right? The other side of it is, conversely, when air pressure is low, the vocal folds tend to come apart. But singers who sing with low air pressure, maybe they really lack energy or they don't have enough breath in them, capacity to breathe. What tends to happen there is, if in our mind we're aiming for a clean sound, but we give very little air pressure, our vocal fold muscles that close the arytenoids will overwork because they're trying to keep this closure in a pressure level that wouldn't just give it to you. So that's another compensation. So what I tend to find is I don't go looking for the vocal fold closure per se. I firstly go looking around the larynx to see what is creating problems with that balancing out in its natural function. So after figuring out what's in the mind. And I find actually, the majority of cases, there's issues going on with either breath flow and how much they think they have to give it, or strange tensions up in the throat and the tongue and the suprahyoid muscles. And if what I do then is I take away let's say I take away the compensatory action, I maybe restore the balance of everything else, and guess what? The voice just got loads worse, right? You're like, oh, okay. But that's normal when you remove a load of compensations. In the first instance, it's going to go bad. And what that exposes is an intrinsic weakness in vocal fold closure, intrinsic. Then I'll go, all right, I'm happy I'll work on cord closure then.
Yeah.
But I have to be sure of that. I can't just go, right, let's get on the glottals, or let's get on the F consonant to release it, because I'm not so sure that is a cause or a symptom.
Another question. What can people work on when they're feeling sick? And I get asked this a lot, and I know this is a very open-ended question, because it depends on how sick, does it hurt? But what is your general answer to that? Like, how do I warm up when I have a cold or I feel I'm getting sick, I have a performance?
Yeah, well, I guess it's a risky business, isn't it? But I feel like I empower my students with enough knowledge to know where to go with it and how far to take it. But there's great research out there by Kitty Verdolini that, like, low amplitude vibration in an exercise like an SOVT, like a V, it does like reduce the lesser parts of inflammation. So inflamed voices get...
I'm sorry, but SOVT is?
Semi-occluded vocal tract exercise. Anything where you sing into a closed mouth or a hum or an NG, they create such a loose environment and less collision on the vocal folds. But what you benefit from is the lovely kind of massage of vibration that happens, whatever it is, 200 times a second. That's a lovely... That's one of those special seats you lay in at the airport, you know, to reduce inflammation. So I think to begin with, if you could reduce some acute inflammation, you could do it that way. And let's face it, sometimes inflammation, when it's gone down, it can create stiffness in muscle activity. Muscles don't work optimally. The whole system doesn't feel great. But the more you gradually stretch muscle, it kind of like restores a bit of balance, still gets rid of a bit of inflammation if you don't overwork it. And then you tend to find you check in with your voice every 20 minutes for like 2 minutes each time across the course of the day. And it actually starts to get to a really nice place. You still feel like crap, but at least your voice is just saying, oh, I'm just really sluggish from it. Sorry. But I do find you have to check in on it regularly and do this very slow to warm up thing where you don't fatigue yourself. And that's how I tend to say what people to do. That's if you have to perform. Mm-hmm. But if you don't, I'm a big fan of resting anyway, man. I love putting my feet up if I have to have a day off ill, and I'll watch a load of movies. But again, if you really need to be working on something, the research towards mental practice is also quite phenomenal. What you can achieve by imagining the task. There's a really good one about pianists who all learnt the same piece, but only one group were allowed to play it every day, and the other group were just only allowed to imagine the fingers moving. And the people who didn't play it, who just imagined it, it took them 5 minutes to get up to the standard of the other guys, which is just phenomenal when it comes to how the brain connects to muscle and how it can still coordinate, even when you haven't performed the task physically. So,
well, that's brilliant because now I can imagine teaching people and still charge them.
Yeah. And the money turns up in my account. This is so good.
And they should know, hey, you got the lesson. I imagined it. No, and it's funny because also along those lines, I was reading something recently where if you've had voice surgery and really need complete vocal rest, don't imagine singing.
Yeah, there's still cord closure. I read that one as well. That was kind of bonkers, actually, that you really got to start thinking about something else, because they did look in, didn't they? And they saw all the movements of when the person was thinking 5 different vowels or something. They were seeing it move, and it was like, whoa, this is wild.
So now not only do you have to recoup, but you have to sit there and go, don't think about singing, don't think about singing. Ah!
Yeah, you got to create some serious distraction.
All right, from Georgia, she asks, this is a big one. Students who struggle with pitch, matching pitch.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that is a tricky one again. And I have bias again, right? So I don't meet many people who don't match pitch, truly. I've obviously worked with quite a few, and still have some that are very recent, right? So with those people, regardless of I'm just like, hey, look, sometimes you might just match pitch in a very short part of the range. If you can do that, then there's something about the function of it that is working well in that part. But generally songs don't operate within 3 notes or 4 or 5 notes, right? They go beyond that. So then the person might tend to find they're well out of tune. So, but as a teacher, I discover there's a very narrow part of the range that is in tune. So we can look at this as like, there's a strong functional element to this. In which case then we exercise. It's, stretch, optimize the function of the muscles so they respond to the commands of the mind, right? So that's like one part of it. And that does tend to clear up pitching issues, but the people that have been resilient have gradually let bits of information out to me that I see as unhelpful concepts in singing. in that, I need to keep my larynx really low. We know that like a low settled larynx is helpful in a lot of ways, but some people are so on that idea that they bring every piece of them to generate that kind of situation. And so you get that, right? Or conversely, that's when someone's like over deep and very flat a lot of the time. Then what you get is the people who are routinely off sharp and maybe a bit all over the place. I do quite a bit of work in palpation at the moment, and I do notice a lot of tension around the hyoid bone, which is what the larynx dangles from. Those
being,
sorry,
palpation being
being the feeling the tissue around the muscle, like under the chin, and waggling things around. And there's a particular space between this hyoid bone and the larynx, and it's the thyrohyoid muscle, right? And they're often very, very tight, and the space there is really shut.
And if they're looking, it's kind of just above your Adam's apple.
Yeah. And then there's a bone that sits just under the jaw, and it takes a bit of kind of training to feel that. But people who I've seen who have been routinely sharp and having trouble their whole career, or rather they don't have a career yet, but they have a very small space in there because there's been a lot of external effort to raise pitch, actually, without knowing how to train to create pitch change as an internal vocal fold function, which goes back to helps internal vocal fold function change pitch, not loads of external effort. So when that singer has been using loads of external effort from a poor singing concept, they've ended up with such a tight space there that all that ever does is just sharpen the pitch. And the singer's so confused because in there, the pitch is solid. They imagine it to be exactly what it is. They hear it to be exactly what it is and hear it wrong. So they're not tone deaf. In there, it's perfectly fine. But here, the effort to sing in the past, and sometimes the anxiety to sing in the past, is dragging the pitch sharp a lot. And then confusion makes them guess the pitches. And then before you know it, they're not just sharp, they're all over the place because their brain and body are arguing. And so I find my experience of pitch matching has been very successful when I've looked at those two things, the conceptual and then how that relates to the functional. And I haven't had them necessarily be matching pitch on pitch tools like, the things you can get online. Only the occasional person I've done that to, but much, much less frequent than you would think.
Well, one of the great challenges of the voice, and you're really nailing it here, is just the relationship between the mind and the muscles of singing. It's rather unique in the body that we don't have this direct conscious control of these muscles. It's almost this abstract art or act that we do.
Yeah, completely.
We have to create these very strong thoughts to be sent down this long meandering nerve that almost seems like nature's afterthought to get to control the functions of singing.
I love that because nature's afterthought, because that nerve goes all the way into the chest and back up again.
The aorta.
Larynx.
Yeah. It's like, oh, wait, maybe we'll need to communicate. Okay. And so biologically, singing has such it's an instrument of the body, but it's such a really non-importance. I mean, the only thing your body needs your voice to do, in terms of evolution, is to call out warnings, for survival.
Exactly. Then the rest of it is like swallowing, breathing, protecting airway, right?
And then you've got the folds protecting foreign objects from coming into the lungs. So this singing, nature doesn't care too much about, although we place a very, very high value on it. So the equipment that we have to do this amazing, almost miraculous act. Singing is just mind-boggling. I can't even say the word.
And that's how amazing it is. It just makes.
I'm just getting myself overexcited, but I'm just the human voice is such an amazing instrument, but our guidance system is so flawed.
Exactly.
In order to be able to,
this is an exceptional thing, isn't it? The singing is not really that normal, and actually some of the tasks we use it for, the voice, are just strange, exceptional tasks. So we have to really fight instinct, nature, habit, and all of the emotions behind it that create worry, anxiety, judgment. Oh my God.
And much of what we do with the voice is quite recent. I mean, in terms of really expanding range, I mean, I think, I don't know the date, I believe it was in the 1800s where they believed that the first full-powered tenor high C was sung.
Yeah, right.
You know, whereas before that, it was just done in falsetto, and folk music was within a certain range. And we're really pushing the boundaries of what this instrument can do in very recent history.
Yeah, completely. So, yeah, I think we've come a long way, really, when you think about it.
We really have. And so the act of singing is much more difficult than it was hundreds of years ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For someone to be a singer. There weren't Ariana Grandes running around in the 1500s.
No, exactly. And so, and also to that person's question, you know, sometimes when you do go through that diagnostic process we spoke about before, whereby you lift the hands above the head and then you get into a lower air pressure in the lungs, more like inhalation, sometimes that lowers the air pressure enough. So, because sometimes air pressure pushes us sharp as well, or makes the pitch go off. So you sometimes find even when somebody adjusts their posture in that way, that they get suddenly a slightly more accurate pitch. So with pitch, I think you can go looking in some of the most unusual places and find it comes together. Interestingly.
It's interesting. So, I know you're running short on time. I got one last question for you, and this is the one I get asked, and I inevitably go blank very often on this question. But who are great current singers that students can listen to and emulate? Because very often, as a voice teacher, they're emulating singers that are causing issues. The singer is in control of what they're doing.
Yeah.
But they're kind of redlining what we would maybe call good vocal technique, or even stepping out of the box, which as an artist, I think is actually okay if you're in control of it. But when students go to imitate it, they're just completely falling off the cliff.
Yeah.
So who are some singers that you feel really kind of show vocal control and technique and kind of have?
Yeah, well, my as much as he is a bit of an outlier, not one I try and emulate, but Michael Kilgore, who's he's a Broadway singer, and I'm not normally into actually Broadway singers, but he's very much more gospel influenced from his background. And for someone who sings so intensely, but with a lot of care for style and the authenticity of the style of music he's singing, plus, on top of that, the lack of physical effort that he is making to sing those notes, because, and I've spoken to him before, in his mind he is secure. He says, I'll jump and I will land on my feet, but I jump. That's the point. So when you're attempting crazy things, the thing is, if you're attempting something kind of out the box a little bit, we can get very excited about that, a bit anxious, and we will just upregulate our whole effort, our whole physical effort to make it there. But there's other ways to get to it. So I find Michael Kilgore kind of embodies the most extreme singing without the most extreme effort. So he is a synergy. He is a synergy, and I love it. I love seeing him sing. And then he brings out the gospel for me as well. So I'm like, oh, and also you really know the music. He's great, but I'm actually really into music at the moment. So, like, for instance, Anderson .Paak is not an amazing singer, but oh my God, the songs, and that's P-A-A-K. He sounds like he's had a hard life. He sounds like he probably has had many bongs. I don't know that for sure. But his voice is so characterful and so rough, but he's a drummer. So his grooves are something else, right? So I love music at the moment. Another quite good singer that I found I used to use a lot in lectures was Jasmine Sullivan, right? Who is raucous. And I used to play her audio of Bust Your Windows when it first came out. And if you were to listen to the sound of her voice and make the face that corresponded with that sound, it would sound like this. It would look like this. All right.
I don't know how to describe the visual you just did.
It's like when you
the day after eating something a little rough.
It's the aftermath of a 15-egg omelette. I know that from years ago, by the way. Right, so it's that. Give it 9 hours after the omelette, and you'll know what I mean, right?
Yes.
Because it sounds so pained and so emotional, right? However, I played them. So this is a live version, by the way. I then showed them the video of her singing it. And you hear this sound, but she is at this lovely award ceremony smiling like this. Making, again, no physical effort, like just loving it, holding out the arms, not anchoring at the elbows, right? Squeezing oranges or something, right? She's just so flexible physically and engaging and happy to be there. And everyone's like, whoa, that's weird. Now I see that face. It even changes the sound. Now I see that face. And so I find that we can get great examples in singers if we watch them live and we see what they do, is that if you hear a sound and you emulate it, you can draw conclusions from the sound that are sometimes quite the opposite and quite incorrect. And if you just model the sound without seeing the singer physically, sometimes you can get a bum steer. So I find that when people are emulating people, and it works the other way, doesn't it? A sound that sounds very easy looks like it comes with a load of physical effort. And that's also a bit of a danger, isn't it, right? For singers who emulate that. So when I look at that question, I don't have that many answers in terms of names, but I feel like more about how do you emulate, how do you create that sound and look in that direction. Don't be fooled by the sound.
Fantastic. All right. When people want to get a hold of you, now you teach on Skype, yes?
Yeah, do quite a lot on Skype, and I also have a studio in London.
In London, great. And then you've got a workshop coming up?
Yeah, workshop for vocal coaches, which is on vocal diagnosis, which is on the 30th of June. That's in person. I'm probably going to do several of them because they're getting kind of oversubscribed. So if you go to my Facebook page, you can see details on that on the timeline at the top, Chris Johnson Vocal Coach. Also, chrisjohnsonvocalcoach.com. You go to the bottom of the page, you can sign up to my email list as well.
Yeah, and I highly recommend that you do that, because I've been chatting with Chris and he has some amazing things planned coming up in the future, including some some digital product.
Yeah, definitely. Lovely.
And you're going to want to be the first to know about this, because it's really some cool stuff. And Chris has a way of looking at diagnosing the voice that is really unique and is really exciting. And once again, I'm kind of jealous. So you
Thanks, man. Much
to get in and be part of that. Hey, Liz, I thank you so much for, I'm full of phlegm. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, John. It's great to see you again. Great to talk again. And I appreciate you having me on.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Now, if you want links to Chris, his website, his Facebook, and information about workshops he has coming up, go to the show notes. It's johnhenny.com/86 for episode 86 /86. And coming up next, I have Dr. Reena Gupta, who actually came down and did an interview with me in the studio. So the sound will be much better for both of us. And Dr. Gupta is a top flight ear, nose, and throat doctor in Los Angeles. She works with all kinds of voice professionals, actors, voiceover artists, celebrities, up and coming singers, and regular old people like me. And she's just absolutely brilliant, very friendly, and really loves to give back to the professional voice community. So I would tune into that one. And you may notice the podcast is now twice weekly. It's a little experiment I'm doing. I'll see if you all can keep up. And if it starts to be a little too much, maybe I'll back it off. But I'm raring to go. I really enjoy doing these. Also, wanted to let you know that I have a brand new course that's only $10. It's The Secrets of Belting. And this is a quick mini course that will walk you through how high intense belt singing works and how to adjust the vowels for it and how to get it working in your voice. Again, I'll have the link in the show notes. Just go to johnhenny.com/86. And until next time, to better singing. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.